Well, you were going 57, I was gone. And there was a school in the area. So the Oregon Trail thing is at a separate class. I was in 8th grade there. So where do you pick up? Where did something? Where are you? We had in Wyoming, Oregon Trail in Wyoming. Not in Oregon.
Good morning, everyone. How are we all doing today? Good. Maybe just a little update on some news around the world. Am I blasting everyone out?
No, I'm gonna plug the TV.
Oh, okay. A little update. Some of you may have heard on the news that there has been some attacks on Syria, that there was some air raids made in Syria by Israel. And there's also been some problems coming out of Yemen. To kind of give you an idea of where that's at, again, I know this is difficult for everyone to see this map, but this little sliver of land right up here is where Israel is. And you can see, compared to everything else, it's a very small sliver. So Syria is up here in this green spot. And then you have down over here, you have Yemen. Okay. Now, what's interesting is when I think about why would Israel send air attacks into Syria? Wasn't Assad deposed? Yes, he was. But to give you an idea of what's happening there, this is a article that comes out through an organization that defends people who are persecuted. It said on a recent Sunday, over 300 Christians filed into church preparing for worship, oblivious to the Islamic terror about the strike. Moments later, 25 Syrian Christians were slaughtered and dozens more traumatically injured by a jihadist suicide bomber. So there is some systematic terror taking place against Christians in Syria, and Israel is doing what they can do to try to put an end to some of that and get rid of that. I find it interesting that Israel, the country of Israel, is not only defending Jewish people, but they're also defending Christians in neighboring countries. So be aware of that. Now, as far as what's happening in Yemen, one of the things you notice, if you look at the map, you will see Yemen down here, and then you see the Red Sea going up. And what's hard to see, there's a little channel here that goes right up to the tip of Israel. And that little water channel leads to a major port. And that major port is where a lot of commerce goes in and out of Israel. So this is a place where food supplies, people, all kinds of commerce go in and out. So as you look at those maps, you can see that there is a narrow spot there. What the terrorists coming out of Yemen like to do is send rockets over to those areas, into those shipping lanes, to bog down and stop all commerce going in and out of Israel from that part of the world. It's a systematic terror attack against the country of Israel, against Jewish people. So if you hear stories of things like, well, why would Israel send air attacks against this place or that place? There's always the backstory that a lot of times the news doesn't give you all of the information about that. So just be aware that these things are happening, and it's all kind of a backup result from the terrorist activity still coming out of those countries that we need to be aware of. Closer to home, on September the 18th, and it seems like things like time is moving a little faster sometimes. It's not that far away. September the 18th is a scheduled Prime Timers Day trip to Concordia, Kansas. And if you're not sure where Concordia is, you just get going straight north out of Wichita, and you keep going. If you can keep your eyes closed, you'll run right into it. So it's going to be a bus trip because it's a little bit of a longer drive and that sort of thing, and keep us all together in some kind of a caravan might be problematic. So it's going to be a bus trip there. Well, what's in Concordia? They start off with a wall mural. It's a 140-foot long brick mural in, it says it's the longest sculptured brick mural in the USA. And then there is the museum next to that. There will be a guided tour of a restored Brown Grand Theater, which lunch is involved in this, and lunch is served. It's a part of the fee. Then we tour the National Orphan Train Museum in the Union Pacific. It's a restored Union Pacific Railroad depot. If you are not familiar with the orphan train, it's an intriguing story. It ran from the mid-1800s clear up until 1929, when children that were orphaned, most generally out of the major cities in the eastern U.S., it's like, what do we do with all of these children? So what they would tend to do is they would put them on trains, and they would load these trains with these orphans and then take them through Midwest and on. And they'd come to a city. They would have the children get out and kind of just be chosen by families who would then choose them to take them on, and they would live with them, these families, and adopt them. For some children, it was a great experience. For some children, not so much. It's a very mixed bag of how these children were received. Some people viewed these children as a free labor opportunity, and other people view these as this is a way to enhance our family. So it's different stories from different people, but it's a very intriguing part of our history. It kind of seems strange to us in today's world, but that was a reality at that time. And I think it's a very interesting part of our country's history. If you haven't read about it, I'd encourage you to try to find a book about it. And of course, when you go there, they're going to have books for sale and things like that. But it's interesting to read up a little bit about it ahead of time. There's all kinds of books about the orphan train. Then one other thing that is a part of our national history, many of you have heard about World War II. Yeah, okay. World War II, one of the things that happened, we tend to think of the prison camps that were in Europe, where maybe American or Allied soldiers were kept in prison camps. The U.S. had prison camps on our soil as well. One of those prison camps was just outside the city of Concordia, Kansas. There are remnants of that prison camp still there, and this will include touring that site and a museum. We've been to the site, but the museum was closed when we went there. So this is an opportunity to see this and learn more, because with coming with a group, we're going to have those reservations and get that tour. I think, again, it's an interesting piece of our history. You can say it's good, bad, or indifferent, but it's history and we can learn from it. And I think the more we understand, the better we understand. So we'll plan on that. We will depart the church at 8 a.m. Okay. So you may have to think of this as another Sunday morning when you're getting up early and coming in and have had your breakfast. It says we depart RP. Does that mean what? RP? Richmond. Okay. I thought maybe they missed an I in the middle of that, and I was getting worried.
That's how I interpret it.
Okay. All right, we'll depart here at 8 a.m. I assume, I don't know if they'll be, which parking lot? Does anyone have any idea? Back here?
She said east.
Eastwind. Okay. So the east parking lot, find a place to park, and we'll load the buses. And you need to obviously be here a little before 8 if we're going to depart. And being on a road trip like that, we'll need to keep a pretty good schedule. So make sure you're here on time. Otherwise, get your skateboard and hang on to the bumper. And then we'll get back to the church at 5:30. Now, there is a fee for this. All the things that are included is the bus trip itself, entrance fees, lunch, and gratuities, and the cost is $60 per person. So if you would figure you were going to do this on your own, you would probably spend that much and be tired of driving. Here we can sit in the back of the bus and throw paper wads at the person in front of us. So wait a minute, that was school bus. Okay. Anyway, these are going to be the comfort coaches, right? So you might think about that. Now, the sign up for this starts next Sunday. So it'll run for 3 Sundays, the 27th and August 3rd and August 10th. So let's make sure that you take advantage of that when you get a chance.
Well,
Yes.
it has a maximum of 54, I believe.
Okay.
That'll be a cutoff, so.
You're talking numbers, not age.
Always going, okay.
Okay. Yeah, get signed up for this, and I think it's a trip you'll enjoy. There's a lot of history there. It's interesting sometimes how much history we have very close to us that we don't realize happens here. And, I don't know when it was I first knew that we had a prison camp at Concordia, Kansas, out of World War II. But that's something you just don't hear a lot about. And we have an interesting history here in this part of the world. It's good to learn about it.
But that theater is worth the ticket.
Yeah.
And you don't get to see that except for these kinds of things.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you just can't walk in and say, hey, I want to see your theater.
Yeah.
Okay, any other items of prayer request or items of praise that we might mention? I didn't mean to kill the discussion or anything. Anything? Okay.
What's the date again? For the trip?
September what did I say? September 18. Okay, September 18. So mark that on your calendar and plan on coming. I think you'll enjoy the travel. Okay, let me open with prayer. Father God, we thank you for this day that you've given to us and this time we can have together. We pray that you would guide us and give us understanding of your word and help us to be open to learn what you have here for us. We just pray for the situation in the Mideast. There is so much confusion, so much chaos, so much problem there. We continue to pray for the safety of the people, the refugees being airlifted out of Azerbaijan as the country there is trying to rid itself of Jewish and Christians alike, and they're intent on ridding their country. To their demise, they're doing these kinds of things. So we pray that you would watch over these people as they are taken out of harm's way, that you would bless them and keep those airwaves open so this can happen. We ask now that you would just guide us today, be with us, and we ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. Before you leave, I have some things for an upcoming lesson I'd like for you to photocopy for us. So try to remind me before you leave, and I'll try to get that to you. Okay, we're looking at Ezekiel chapter 19. So if you want to turn to that, I'm going to go through some of this, and some of this is as you read through it, begins to feel a little redundant. So I'm going to trip through some of this a little bit faster and quicker, and maybe just highlight a few verses here and there. But if you turn to chapter 19 in Ezekiel, one of the things, if you have chapter headings, this one says, in my version says, a lament over Israel's princes. And so then you look at the very first verse and it says, take up a lament concerning the princes of Israel and say, and then it goes through the lament. So this is almost like a funeral dirge, so to speak. If you skip down to the very last verse in that chapter, it says, this is a lament and is to be used as a lament. Okay, that's probably not a word we use a lot, but it is kind of like, it's a sad song. It's a funeral dirge is almost another way of saying that. So this chapter is all about that. It seems to be kind of a parenthetical thing in between these chapters that talk about judgment and retribution. This is stuck in here. Because all of this judgment happens, there's going to be a lament. There's going to be sadness. Now, I just want to look at the first couple of verses. It says, take up a lament concerning the princes of Israel and say, What a lioness was your mother among the lions. She lay down among them and reared her cubs. Well, this is like, well, what does this mean? And the lioness probably refers to the Davidic line in Israel. And so it's saying you had this line of kings, of royalty. And so it's kind of referring to that. And then it goes on. It talks about some other things in there, like in verse 12, it says, but it was uprooted, it meaning the country, the kingdom. It was uprooted in fury and thrown to the ground. The east wind made it shrivel, and it was stripped of its fruit. Its strong branches withered, and its fire consumed it. What does that mean? Is that talking about a forest fire? Probably not. This is probably talking about another country that came in and destroyed Israel, destroyed Jerusalem. From the east, you can speculate, but it seems like the most logical thing. If you look east of Jerusalem, you're looking at Babylon. So this is probably a reference to say Babylon came in, destroyed Israel, and you're sad about it. And so it just talks about that destruction. Okay. I know I'm skipping a lot, but are there questions or comments as you peruse that, thoughts and additions? Yes, Carol.
I'm curious about the symbolism of the mother.
The symbolism of mother. It's like, I think a lot of times, well, pretty much all the time, countries are identified in a feminine gender. So that puts it into that category. And it is the line of David that gave birth to the greatness of the nation of Israel through David and Solomon. And then it remained in Judah for a while, and there were some good kings that kept things going. But eventually they deteriorated. So I think the references and the symbolism of mother is, this is the country, this is the kingdom that gave birth to this. And one of the things that we know about this side of history is that the kingdom of Judah maintained their integrity as a people group. And I don't mean moral integrity necessarily, but they maintain themselves as a people group, so that is the group of people that gave rise to the Messiah. So that's how I'd see it. Does that make sense, or does that create more questions?
The mother in the story is Israel?
Yes.
Okay, and so the mother had the lions, the children, the babies, and yet they went forth and devoured men.
Mhm.
Explain that, please.
Okay, let's read this. She brought up one of her cubs, and he became a strong lion. So one of the things that it symbolizes the nation of Israel at that time were lions. And if you remember, when Solomon built his throne, and when just in their country they referred themselves as a lion. A recent military operation when Israel went in to Iran and did a lot of bombing. You remember what that military operation was called?
Yes.
Operation Rising Lion. So that symbolism of lion has stayed with Israel from this time on forward to today. Okay. He learned to tear the prey, and he became a man-eater. The nations heard about him, and he was trapped in their pit. They led him with hooks to the land of Egypt. So there was a time when they became very powerful, and they were very powerful under David and Solomon. But then the kingdom split, and they started regressing. It got to the place where basically all they had was metropolitan Jerusalem, and they had shrunk that much. So they had been devoured, but they conquered a lot of peoples, and you read some of the battles and the history of the battles that David fought. They destroyed a lot of, in fact, God said, "You're not the one to build the temple, you're a man of blood." Now, this wasn't because he was acting capriciously. He was acting under direction of God. But he said, you did. See, I look at this and I think, then as of now, and you think of this in a corporate sense, I think corporations, there are times when they need a general to lead their corporation, a person who can go out and fight a battle. And then there's times when they need a peacetime person to go out and lead their corporation. Same with countries. So there are times, and some people are gifted at leading during times of conflict. Some people are gifted in leading in times of peace. So they had both of that. Bonnie?
I also see a picture in verse 4 of Joseph, talking about being trapped in a pit and then led to Egypt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's probably more symbolism in there than we realize that is there. Betty, did I answer your question or not? Okay. Any other comments on that? Okay. Anything else on chapter 19? There's a lot in here in this lament that I think it feels a little redundant, so I won't read verse by verse. Let's look at chapter 20. And if you still have your handout that I handed out the first day, and it was two-sided, and on the back side, which is labeled as handout number 2, it gives you the kind of the timeline for the visions. And if you see that, you can see verse 20, chapter 20, verse 1, in the 7th year, in the 5th month, on the 10th day, some of the elders of Israel came to inquire of the Lord, and they sat down in front of me. So this takes place about a year after, and if you look on that chart, you will see that it identifies where we're at here on chapter 20. Everyone fine? I don't know. There's not going to be a test on this, so don't worry about it too much. So, but it gives you a little bit of a timeline of when some of these things happen. Now, I think it's interesting as you look at this, you note how the elders came to Ezekiel. It says, some of the elders came to inquire of the Lord. So they had to realize the leadership of those people in exile in Babylon had to recognize Ezekiel as kind of the guy that had the communication line to God. Ezekiel, as we think and maybe speculate how we know a little bit about him, we can see that he was of the priestly class and probably of a royal line. So he had some standing in the community this way. Now, some of the things that he did for object lessons, they may have thought he was a little bit a half bubble off plumb, but he got their attention, and they said, this guy may be a little wacky, but he has a direct line to God, so we need to sit down and listen. So they're coming to inquire about what's going on. Okay, this is it. Any questions or comments on the first couple of verses there? Okay, let's look at verses 2 through 7. Then the word of the Lord came to me. So this is Ezekiel speaking. Son of man, speak to the elders of Israel and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Have you come to inquire of me? As surely as I live, I will not let you inquire of me, declares the sovereign Lord. Will you judge them? Will you judge them, son of man? Then confront them with the detestable practices of their ancestors and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. On the day I chose Israel, I swore with uplifted hand to the descendants of Jacob and revealed myself to them in Egypt. With uplifted hand I said to them, I am the Lord your God. On that day I swore to them that I would bring them out of Egypt into a land I had searched out for them, a land flowing with milk and honey, the most beautiful of all lands. And I said to them, each of you get rid of the vile images you have set your eyes on, and do not defile yourself with the idols of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Okay, this is a little bit of a review of the frustration that God has with the people when they followed idol worship, even after all the miracles they saw in Exodus. Sometimes when we read this in history, we go back and we say, okay, there was this people group that had been essentially enslaved in Egypt. They had been there for about 400 years. This people group had maintained themselves a people group and did not intermarry with the Egyptians and did not lose their national identity. They had national identity, they had tribal identity, and somehow they managed to maintain that. And then they said, okay, we've heard this story about a God who saves from our ancestors. But think of the timeline, how far back this goes. 400 years. Do you have stories of your ancestors that go back 400 years? Can you think of what your great grandparents said and felt, how they felt about things 400 years ago? If you can, you're way ahead of me. I don't have a clue. I am 400 years back. Where was your bloodline 400 years ago? Yet they maintained this national identity. They maintained this concept of God, but it had kind of been tainted because they lived in a dictated world, and it was a world of multiple gods. Why did God send all these different plagues to Egypt? Why did he send a plague, let's say, of frogs? Because the Egyptian worshipped frogs. And God, every one of these plagues, God is saying, you think that's God? Let me show you what I can do. And he poked his finger in the eye of all of those false gods. The miracles he did is amazing when you think about it. How could they not believe? How could they go back? But yet, it didn't take very long when they said, oh, we want a golden calf to worship. So God is frustrated with them and said, listen, you goofballs. Wait, that's a different version. Did you learn anything when you were in Egypt and you saw all of this stuff? And what happened? So God is expressing his frustration with them at this point in time. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on this? Okay, let me do a few more verses here, 8 through 12. But they rebelled against me, and they would not listen to me. They did not get rid of the vile images they had set their eyes on, nor did they forsake the idols of Egypt. So I said I would pour out my wrath on them and spend my anger against them in Egypt. But for the sake of my name, I brought them out of Egypt. I did it to keep my name from being profaned in the eyes of the nations among whom they lived, and in whose sight I had revealed myself to the Israelites. Therefore I led them out of Egypt and brought them into the wilderness. I gave them my decrees and made known to them my laws by which the person who obeys them will live. I gave them my Sabbaths as a sign between us, so they would know that I, the Lord, made them holy. Well, this is kind of an interesting statement. It continues on some of their abuses, but notice especially verses 11 and 12. I gave them my decrees and made known to them my laws. And then he says, I also gave them my Sabbaths. So this is a indication that they ignored God's commands and they abused the Sabbath. Is it possible that that same kind of attitude has polluted our culture in today's world? Is it possible? Yes, I think we could look and say they is us, okay? We see that, and sometimes we can read this and we can say, what's the matter with those people? Didn't they understand? Didn't they see all of the things that happened? And then we look back and say, ooh, I'm pointing one finger out there, but there's three fingers pointing back here. So we have to look at this and say, what is the lesson for us today? So it is, are we following God's laws and are we abusing the Sabbath? I've said before, sometimes when I look at church attendance in our city, one of the biggest attended churches is you go down Ridge Road, you'll see all the cars parked and all the people out there at the Church of the Holy Orb. Does that make sense? The Church of the Holy Orb, they're out there playing ball. Okay. And that's what they see as that's important. And that's where people are spending their time. Is that abuse of the Sabbath? I don't know. You can argue one way or another. And maybe they went to church on Saturday night, so this is okay. Maybe they'll go later. So I'm not going to say that these people are all condemned, but I am saying that's pretty popular. So I think
perception of.
Yeah. It is a negative perception. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's take a few more verses and we'll look at verses 13 through 29. I'm not going to read each verse there. Let's just look at a few. This continues to go over the offenses of previous generations and these practices, how they filtered down in today's world. One of the things that you see is if you look at verse 13, yet the people of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not follow my decrees, rejected my laws by which the person obeys them will live, and they utterly desecrated my Sabbath. Skip down to 14. But for the sake of my name, I did what would keep it from being profaned in the eyes of the nations and who say I had brought them out. 16 also talks about them desecrating the Sabbath, for their hearts were devoted to their idols. Yet I looked on them with pity and did not destroy them or put an end to the wilderness. Verse 20, keep my Sabbaths holy. 21, but the children rebelled against me. They did not follow my decrees. They were not careful to keep my laws, of which I said, the person who obeys them will live in them, and they desecrated my Sabbath. So I said I would pour out my wrath on them and spend my anger against them. 23, also with uplifted hand, I swore to them in the wilderness that I would disperse them among the nations and scatter them through the countries, because they had not obeyed my laws but had rejected my decrees and desecrated my Sabbaths, and their eyes lusted after their parents' idols. There seems to be a theme there through this chapter of what God says is the problem. Now, one of the things that they did with this, let's see, I want to go to through 29. If you turn over and look at starting with verse 27, 28, I brought them into the land I had sworn to give them, and they saw any high hill or any leafy tree. They offered their sacrifices, made offerings that aroused my anger, and presented their fragrant incense and poured out their drink offerings. Then I said to them, what is this high place you go to? It is called Bama to this day. Yeah. So what is this thing about high places? You read a lot in the Old Testament about these people going to high places to worship. So what's your understanding of what we're talking about here when he says they're going to these high places? Why was this a problem? What was going on? By the way, Jean Foth says good morning, class. So hi, Jean. Hi, Jean. That sounds a little. That was a clean comment, wasn't it? What about the high places? What strikes you about that tends to be so negative? Any thoughts on that? Go ahead, Kathy.
Well, all of this tells me that worshiping God only is important. And why the high places? That's where they put the idols, the altars, for people to go. But he's a jealous God. He does not want to share his honor and glory with any idol.
Yeah. So the high places weren't always necessarily the top of a mountain. They could have been in other places. But what it referred to localized places that people would set up. And so it was very localized, regionalized kinds of a place. So there, Israel's not a big country, but still, in that day, 50 miles away was a big trip, so to speak. Okay. So different regions would say, we're going to dedicate this spot for our worship center, rather than seeing the temple as the place to go. So what they would tend to do is their worship style, their worship process would become localized and would be different from this place to that place to that place. And as Kathy said, sometimes it would involve other altars, offering incense, doing worship kinds of things that would differ from place to place. What this led to was blended religion. Blended religion is a problem. And we can look at this, and I think we've said this before and sometimes, but I recall Diane had a former coworker that told her this is a part of this coworker's life process of finally becoming a Christian. But at one point in her life, she says, well, what I kind of do is I see Christianity as valid, but I blend it in with a little Buddhism and a little this and a little that. It was blended, saying, well, there's good in this and there's good in that other thing, and so I'm just going to put it all together. So it mixed it all up. blended religion becomes a curse. Bonnie?
This is kind of a question. Do you think that possibly they chose high places thinking that if they would do that, they could get closer to God? But they were wrong because they weren't really worshiping God. And he's telling you, I will come to you. You do not need to do anything. I will be the one that instigates.
Well, like I said, according to what some studies have said, it wasn't necessarily always at the top of the hill. So I'm not sure it's elevation as much as seclusion. And so they would separate themselves out. You will read, if you read in the history, like in Kings and Chronicles, it'll say, well, this was a good king and he did this and thus and so, but he did not destroy all the high places. And so there's, you did good, you just didn't go all the way. You ran a good marathon, except you stopped 2 miles short. Joel.
Yeah, I was just reminded of the Tower of Babel, and God could have just let them keep on building until it all crashed.
Mm-hmm.
But he stopped them at a point. This is what you do in parenting too, right? Stopping them at a point and saying, you can't reach me that way. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then of course the language thing.
Right. So yeah, we see, Archie.
Well, it's my understanding that one of the things that happened at these high places that they had prostitutes, and that sex was part of that religion. And I think that might have something to do with why it was so hard to get rid of those.
Yeah.
Also sacrifice of children.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Depending on the direction of the different blended religion, you had things like the prostitution, you had child sacrifice, et cetera, et cetera. So there was that human pull to say that this stuff is seems enticing to certain people. For the life of me, I can't understand why sacrificing children is enticing to people, just like I can't understand why people want to abort children, but that's me. Bill.
Yeah, when you go through this, you have to remember that the basis of where we are is what is going on in our heart. And where is our allegiance? Because you take like Ezekiel, he skips around going to Egypt when there was simply 12 families, 12 brothers, that was the nation. And so you have to remember, they didn't have the law then. Those 12 didn't. That didn't happen until a long time later when Moses took them through the desert and was given the 10 Commandments and further development of the law later on. So, yes, I think a lot of this you have to take it not as being a precise time frame and actual happenings in some precise sequence, but it kind of speaks to the fact that do we have a heart that is in allegiance to God or not? Mm-hmm. And the law that we have in our heart, knowing that where there is good and evil, we are very erratic in how we allow God to work in our heart, and we deviate so readily from his instruction.
It's an excellent point, and one of the things that this underscores is that the human heart hasn't changed over millennial time. We still have these tendencies. So we can look at this and say, oh, that was an old lesson way back when, that doesn't pertain to us anymore. The reality is, yes, it does. It just may be a different geographical setting. We may wear different clothing. We may be different on the surface, but in the heart, we have the same kind of heart that these people had that were being condemned. Joel?